Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on really an incredibly impactful journey into the evolution of applied behavior analysis, ABA. Specifically, we're exploring its fascinating shift towards what's known as the verbal behavior approach. We've got this powerful chapter from a book here. It doesn't just dive into the science of helping kids with autism learn and communicate. It also shares this really intimate parent perspective, navigating this hopeful but sometimes pretty challenging landscape. So our mission today, let's unpack this foundational knowledge, pinpoint those key shifts in thinking, and most importantly, pull out those practical insights, those aha moments for you.
And it really is a rich narrative we have here. We'll be tracing the path from some, truly groundbreaking early studies that offered immense hope, right through to these more nuanced, child-centered approaches that are reshaping how we think about teaching language today. It's quite a journey, showing up that constant search for what truly works best.
Okay, so let's set the historical stage. Thinking about ABA's origins, especially for autism, one name really looms large, right? Dr. Ivar Lovaas. His work back in the late 20th century cast this, very hopeful shadow. And many parents, like the one in our source material, were really influenced by Catherine Maurice's books. Let Me Hear Your Voice in '93, and Behavioral Intervention for Young Children with Autism in '96. These books didn't just inform, they really popularized the Lovaas approach, made it the gold standard for doing ABA back then.
That's right. And the chapter highlights Lovaas's huge 1987 study, a real game changer. It looked at 59 kids with autism. The findings offered something totally new. The best outcomes group, that was 19 kids that got intensive ABA. We're talking 40 hours a week, one-on-one. And the results, revolutionary. Nearly half, 47% of that group, were indistinguishable from their typical peers by first grade.
Wow. 47%.
Yeah. It wasn't just hope anymore. It was the first real quantifiable proof that intensive early intervention could fundamentally change things for these kids. It really shattered those old ideas that autism was, untreatable. It gave a concrete path forward.
That really puts the early impact in perspective. And it's not just the numbers, is it? It's the shift in outlook for parents who had so little before. The chapter emphasizes this drive, comparing it to seeking treatment for something like leukemia, finding the therapy with the best odds for a normal life.
Exactly. And it lasted. A 1993 follow-up study showed these kids kept their gains at age 13, no special ed needed, successful in regular classes. And then Jacobson, Molick, and Green in '98 found that, yes, this Lovaas model was expensive up front, but it was incredibly cost-effective long-term. Those kids needed way fewer services later on. It showed a real societal benefit.
Okay, so with this amazing research and determined parents, you'd think getting these intensive programs would be simple, but the chapter shows it wasn't. It points out this dilemma. Doctors diagnose, but educators often provide the treatment, and they might have different ideas about what's cost-effective or appropriate. The material even uses that Cadillac versus Chevy analogy for a free, appropriate public education.
Yeah, that analogy nails the tension. That intensive Lovaas model, 40 hours a week, one-on-one, it was, and often still is, very expensive. So it often met resistance from schools who might prefer other therapies they deemed appropriate, speech, OT, maybe eclectic preschool programs. The pressure on parents was huge. The chapter mentions being told to eliminate the word best from their vocabulary when talking to schools. It really shows the system, even with good intentions, sometimes struggling to line up resources with the most effective research-backed stuff.
So facing these barriers, the parent's journey in the chapter takes this really interesting turn. Even while making progress with the Lovaas approach, that same drive for more led them to find another form of ABA, the verbal behavior approach. How did that happen?
Well, it wasn't throwing out ABA altogether. It was more like an evolution within ABA. Verbal behavior, or VB, is presented as something that builds on all of the ABA research, but also enhances a child's ability to learn functional language. It's a subtle shift, but a really critical one. VB sees language not just as words, but as a behavior you can shape. It pays close attention not just to what a child says, but why they're saying it. The function is key.
That makes immediate sense, focusing on the why. So let's decode this VB approach. It feels kind of new in widespread use, maybe the last 10, 15 years, but the chapter says it's based on older work. We're talking B.F. Skinner's 1957 book, Verbal Behavior. The chapter calls it seminal, but very complicated. Did it take a while for these ideas to catch on?
Oh yeah, Skinner's book was incredibly dense. The practical application wasn't obvious right away. It really took researchers like Dr. Jack Michael and his student Mark Sundberg at Western Michigan University and Dr. Joe Spradlin at University of Kansas. to start translating Skinner's complex theories into actual methods for teaching language to kids with developmental disabilities. Mark Sundberg's 1980 dissertation was a milestone, using sign language based on Skinner's ideas. But the real game changer for parents, as the chapter notes, was in 1998. Sundberg and Tardington published this accessible 3-book set, and the most popular one was the Assessment of Basic Language and Learning Skills, the ABLLS, pronounced ABLLS.
The ABLLS, ABLLS. The chapter calls it a curriculum, an assessment, as well as a skills tracking form. Sounds comprehensive. Was it easy to use, or did that depth create challenges, especially for parents trying to figure it out?
It's a super powerful tool, especially if you're a VB-trained consultant. But yeah, the chapter admits it can be very overwhelming for parents or pros. Without that background, just the assessment could take hours. And then you still had to interpret it and build a program. But despite that, by the early 2000s, word got out about the amazing results of VB. Parents were traveling miles for workshops, seeing videos from experts like Carbone, Sundberg, Partington. This parent energy really drove a big shift for many programs, moving away from strict DTT or Lovaas towards VB. It was the power of seeing real, rapid progress.
Okay, so this brings us right to the big question. How exactly is verbal behavior different from that earlier Lovaas DTT model? DTT, discrete trial teaching, often involves that structured sequence, right? Demand, response, reward, like touch nose, child touches nose, gets a pretzel. Very clear.
Exactly. And that core sequence, demand, response, consequence, it's still there in VB. VB uses the same principles of behavior analysis. But the approach is different, especially how it starts and how it tackles language. VB is much more child-centered, right from the get-go. It starts by figuring out the child's reinforcers, basically, what they like, what motivates them. Then there's this crucial early step called pairing. The instructor and the work area get linked with freebies, giving the child good stuff without asking for anything first.
So making the adult the fun person.
Precisely, the giver of all good things. The goal is to get the child to want to come to the instructor, to run toward them. That insight, making the adult the source of good stuff from the start, it changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah.
Less resistance, more engagement. It can cut down tantrums almost immediately.
That's a huge difference right there. And then you mentioned the request, being central to VB. Can you explain that more? Maybe using the example of teaching the word ball.
Sure. With VB, teaching ball means teaching all its functions, what we call verbal operants. So the child first learns to man for the ball, ask for it when they want it, maybe holding out their hand, saying ball.
Yeah.
But they also learn to label a picture of a ball, repeat ball if you say it, touch the ball when asked, and eventually answer questions like, what do you play with? This is a key difference from traditional Lovaas DTT, where expressive language might not be taught directly at first for non-vocal kids.
Right, the focus might be more on following directions, matching.
Exactly. Compliance, receptive skills, imitation. Maybe PECS, the picture system, comes later if the child stays non-vocal. But often those different functions of a word aren't tackled early on. VB, though, it immediately teaches some form of communication, usually sign language, for nonverbal kids. Why? Because the ability to request command is seen as top priority. It lets kids communicate their needs right away, which helps prevent problem behaviors. Plus, the chapter points out, VB often requires relatively less documentation. Less paperwork means more time actually engaging with the child, more learning opportunities.
That focus on functional communication from day one really stands out. Now, I've heard a couple of misconceptions about VB the chapter tackles. 1, it's only for non-talking kids. 2, it's only for kids who can talk. Which is it?
Well, neither is right. The chapter clarifies VB includes all kinds of non-vocal communication, pointing, signing, writing, gestures, even tantrums, really, because those are attempts to communicate, just not very effective ones. The key thing is VB is best used with kids who aren't yet conversational, whether they use spoken words or not. So it works for almost anyone with developmental delays, even adults who aren't conversational yet. It's about teaching communication as a behavior that achieves something, like teaching how to use words to get needs met, not just reciting them. And while both DTT and VB work, the source suggests kids and professionals often find the VB approach more receptive, more engaging. Now, let's talk about some pitfalls seen in programs not using VB, maybe run by folks who mean well but aren't as credentialed. One big one is accidentally rewarding negative behaviors, like if a kid whines for a puzzle and gets it, you've just taught them whining works.
Right, you reinforce the whining, not asking nicely.
Exactly. Another issue. Work that's too hard or goes on too long with not enough reward. That just leads to frustration.
Yeah.
A really significant problem is when non-vocal kids only get taught receptive skills matching, following directions, imitation cells, but never learn to express themselves. so they stay nonvocal. And the chapter mentions non-behaviorally based programs. The child might look happy, but without systematic teaching of communication. Progress is often slow, hard to measure. They might try teaching complex things like pronouns way too early for a nonvocal child. This is a striking example. Asking a nonvocal 2-year-old to say, "I want more blocks, please," when they couldn't even speak or sign, setting them up to fail.
Wow, yeah. That really highlights needing to start where the child actually is. It's interesting then that the material says having a DTT background can actually be a huge advantage for moving to VB. It gives you that foundation in prompting, fading data reinforcement. But it also stresses that implementing VB well is complex. Ideally, you need a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst, with VB expertise for training and updates.
That need for qualified pros is definitely real. But let's be honest, consultants cost money, and that can be tough for families already dealing with a lot. But the chapter offers hope. It says it's possible to put together a simpler program that will get you started. You can see results, get things moving, even if you can't get a BCBA right away. It empowers parents to start doing something. And the key message is, VB is not a fad. It's based on Skinner's science. It enhances ABA. Lovaas gave that vital foundation, that hope. But research keeps moving. Motivation, manding, verbal operants, errorless teaching, reinforcement. This work extends Lovaas dramatically. The chapter argues strongly there's no reason to wait to use VB. We need the latest, most effective stuff now.
So what does all this mean for you, listening? The goal of this material we've dug into, it's really to give you that fundamental info, help parents and professionals understand the VB approach better, so you can maybe start incorporating some insights right away. It's about empowering action with effective, evolving science. And that wraps up our deep dive. We've gone from the foundational Lovaas model all the way to this evolving, language-focused verbal behavior approach. It really shows that constant search for the best, most effective ways to help kids learn and communicate.
And this whole journey raises a really important question, doesn't it? As fields evolve, as research gives us better tools, how do we make sure the truly best, most effective, up-to-date treatments aren't just identified, but are actually accessible and understandable to the people who need them most? That's a principle that goes way beyond just this field, It impacts lives everywhere.
Indeed. A powerful thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you feel more informed, more equipped, and maybe a little more curious.